Hello, and welcome back to the Moneymatics Podcast. My name is Amaba Bola, and on today's show, we're talking about something that many of us think about as we hit new milestones, as we hit a new age. We're getting to 30s, to 40s, 50s, and we start thinking about what we wish we knew about money when we were younger. And on today's show, I have with me my very, 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 very old time, long time, old friend. On this show, I have with me Jumoke. For those of you who have been following me since the days of intentional randomness, you know that she's always a regular guest on anything I'm doing. So today, we're going to be giving you, a peep in some of the things that we talk about when we are having money conversations. So on today's episode, I have with me Olajumoke. Jumoke, say hello to our audience, our viewers.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Bobby, for inviting me to this platform. I'm very grateful.
So we've been talking about this before, so it's not new, but we want to, just have that conversation and then share it with other people because I think a lot of us look back wherever we are in our money journey and we're thinking, oh, I wish I knew this, I wish I knew this when I was younger. And you and I have talked about that. In fact, when I was asking you, like, oh, you should come on the show and let's share about something, you were like, oh, this is something that I would like to actually talk about, what I wish I knew about money when I was in my 20s. You're getting closer to the new milestone. Like someone said, you're about to
Yes.
hit the middle age where we can officially name you middle-aged woman. And so I know you've been
Well, why
I
not?
know you've been having
Yeah.
a lot of thoughts about what you wish you knew about money when you were younger. And so we're going to get
Mhm.
into that for our viewers today. But before we go on, I just wanted to, just give us tell us about yourself. Who is Olajumoke?
Well, interestingly, when people ask me that, like I said earlier on, I'm a woman of many arts. It depends on which side
Mm,
you want to know. I can start by saying I'm multi-talented. I trained
mm,
as a nurse,
I like that.
but also at the moment I'm a specialist nurse. I will call myself a nurse leader, but
Mm,
also a creative designer. I'm a child of God. I'm a worshiper. But also in recent years, one thing I've learned is also that I'm a coach. My passion is to see the best in people, but also not just
mm,
see the best in them, but to help them to be the best of who they are, regardless of which season they are in their lives. And I just use my own personal experience to help to support people. My
mm,
personal motto is if I've gone through something, either good or bad, I want
mm.
you to learn from that and make the best for yourself as well. So, like I said, I'm a woman of many arts. So it depends on which area you want me to talk
I
about.
love that. Funny enough, what I'm discovering now about life is that a lot of us have more than one thing, more than one talent that we have, even though sometimes some people do not acknowledge that. And so it's such a beautiful thing to recognize that you are someone who has many sides to you and many creative sides as well. So really,
Mhm.
really interesting. But let's get into the topic, just straight into it. I like to dive into it straight away. If you were to remember, what is your first or earliest money memory? Your earliest money
Um,
memory.
well, I would say, interestingly, when I was thinking about money or how money works started from my grandmother, my
Mm,
paternal grandmother. She was a businesswoman. My
mm,
earliest memory would be probably around 3 or probably 4 when
mm,
we would visit her and she's got like some books she was going through with my dad in terms of
mm,
assets or in terms of just talking about money generally in terms of our business. That would
mm,
say for me that was the vivid picture of where I understand that record keeping is important.
mm,
Then, as I grew older, I also learned that my mom keeps track of her money,
mm,
incomes, and also outgoings. So I grew up seeing my mom keeping track of her finances as well as likewise my dad as well.
mm.
I would stumble into my dad's diary and see his list of outgoings
Wow.
and expenses. So I kind of had an idea very early in life that you need to keep track of
Mm.
your finances. Did I make use of that? I'll come to that in a bit. So I also being raised by working class parent, I
Mm.
understand that it's more of the mentality of working hard,
Yeah, that's
also
true.
making money, more of, it's like your life is, you know, you go to school, you start
Mm.
earning, you start making money, you start supporting your family and stuff like that. Growing up, we both grew up together in Ife. We very conservative. Most people back then we knew will probably just have
Mm.
their own house, one.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
form of
true.
investment
Made.
for them. Or most
Mm.
investment people will have is probably cars or having a landed property, or probably at
Mm.
times it's just investing in your family, your siblings. So that's kind of an investment. So I would say
Or
my
investing in
journey
your
in life,
children, making sure they went to the
yeah,
best schools, even though you couldn't
the
afford it,
biggest
kind of. Mm.
exactly, the biggest investment when we are growing up was more of investing in education. That was one of the biggest investment that I would say that seeing my
Mm.
parent, that was what was important to them at that point. But interestingly, my grandparents on both sides, interestingly, were
Mm.
business owners, especially my grandfather. That's one thing I will never forget. He died
Mm.
quite young, probably in his 50s, but we're still, as far as I know, there's still dividends of his investment over 50 years is passed on that the children and grandchildren are still living on. So that stayed
Mm.
with me for a while as well, that you need to invest early in life. So there's so many, growing up, I had different, I would say, different exposure to different aspects of money
Of
making,
money.
either through businesses or through career. So yeah.
Mm. So you were talking earlier that, oh, I saw my mom, my grandmother, my grandfather, even my father keep track of their expenses and everything. And you said,
Mhm.
did I make use of that? So my question would then be, did you see these things and then say to yourself, oh, I'm gonna be like this with money? Or was it just something you saw, but then you did not think so much about applying? Or did
Um,
you apply them?
I think
How
I
was your own relationship with money based on the
so
fact that you saw these things?
interestingly, like we always say, that my lived experience is different from my parents or my grandparents, because
Mm.
in my teen years I relocated from Nigeria. So
Mm.
coming into the Western world was totally different from the environment I grew up in.
Up in, that's
So
true.
even though I knew, not that I could practice it, but coming to the Western world was slightly different. I started working from the age of 19, if I can say
Mm.
that. And the way the Western world works at that point is different. So it's
Mm.
more of I would say more of paying the bills and more starting a new life. And at
Mm.
that point, also there were different priorities. So it was more or less me becoming more, I wouldn't say breadwinner, but I would say probably shared breadwinner, if I can
Mm.
say that, supporting my family. So I still bring that mentality and the value system of family, supporting your family, into the Western world as well.
Okay.
So I would say, because the way the Western world is structured, you can't just, you've got your direct debit and stuff like that. But I wasn't
Mm.
intentional about budgeting, but I was
Mm.
intentional about making sure I paid my bills. That was
Okay.
important. Yeah.
So you weren't budgeting, but you were making sure
Hmm.
you paid your bills. Because I was going to ask, like, okay, in we were talking about back home in Nigeria, growing up, you saw a lot of people invested in their siblings, a lot of people invested in their children. I can tell stories of that as well. Many people know that, especially if your parents were like the firstborn, or you know that they invested in their siblings
Hmm.
and then they went on to invest in their children until you brought that to the West. Did that affect your financial life or your finances
Mm,
or your approach to finance, bringing this very cultural African way of thinking into the UK and trying to live the Western way, but still having responsibilities that are very, very much common to people who move from developing countries into
mhm.
Europe. What do you think? Did that affect your
Oh,
finance?
definitely, definitely. I'm raised in a family whereby, we family is very important,
Mm.
and you have the privilege to support your family regardless. And we still do that
Mm.
even up to now. We still support each other. So
Yeah.
I think it's a strong value system, but probably
Mm.
there would have been ways I could have done it better. That's another
Okay.
thing. But I think, yes, I brought that into the mentality as well, into
Mm.
when I came into this country, and it paid off. it paid off. I wouldn't say
Mm.
because at the end of the day, it has its pros and cons. Pros in terms
Mm.
of when you have a common port, you're able to achieve a lot together, which
Yeah,
is
that's true.
good. But also probably we could have used that common port to invest early rather than just
Mm.
trying to survive or pay the bills. So that's something probably if I were to go back in time, we could have used that to do a lot of things better. Yeah.
So yeah, now we're getting into the crux of the matter, right? What is like
Mhm.
the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of what you wish you knew about money?
Saving early.
Mm.
Like I said, I started working at the age of 19. So for me, if no matter what I was doing at that time, if I'd put a certain amount of money somewhere or saving since
Mm.
the age of 19, I'm almost 20 years into my career. So you can imagine
Mm.
how much in terms of saving and investing I would have achieved in
Done.
20
Mm.
years because it's also understanding that when you're younger, you have the capacity to save more. I was living with my
That's
mom,
true.
so
Mm.
it wasn't as if I had that much expenses, to be honest. So, of course, there were expenses, day-to-day runnings and stuff like that. Being a nurse, then I had the ability to do extra shifts. If I'd even devoted just one extra shift to just investments,
Mm.
and in 20 years, I could be reaping off the dividends now.
That's
So
right.
that's one thing I would have told myself. But also the other things I learned, I'm not going to say it was all doom and gloom. One of the biggest decisions and understanding was I am my biggest investment. So it's also
Mm.
understanding that even though I didn't invest in properties and stuff like that, I was investing in knowledge. I was
Yeah, that's
investing
true.
in
You
improving
like taking
myself.
courses.
I was very determined to be the best in my career and growing up in leadership. So I wouldn't say that even though I didn't invest, in properties, I was investing in knowledge. I was investing in my career. I could have done. It's also understanding that with financial freedom, it starts with you. So it's not that mean that you are your biggest investment. Yeah.
So, if you maybe we'll get there, but I think we should just go there now. If you were to look back, what
Mhm.
prevented you the most from saving? Is it just not that having that financial literacy? Is it like you were, yeah, were you a big spender on other things? What was the major reason why you think you didn't invest? Was it just a lack of financial literacy?
I would say it's a lack of financial literacy. I would say, yeah, definitely. That I would say that's the biggest factor. I think the
Mm.
reality then was I did do savings. It's not as if I didn't do savings. The ajo here and there. People who don't know about ajo, it's
Contributions, yeah.
contribution. So I did that. I used that to do my degree. I did so many things. I traveled a lot, but I was a big spender
Mm.
as well. So yes, I was a big spender. I splashed, but also yeah, just living the life really.
Just living the
Not
life, the baby girl life.
yeah, I wouldn't say baby girl like I like good things. I like quality things, and I was able to do that for myself. But
Mm.
I could still have that, but also still save and invest. So,
Mm.
and I think the biggest thing is lack of financial
Financial
literacy,
literacy.
really. And I don't think it was just me. I think it's just that second generation immigrant, you don't have that level of pressure trying to, and that's another
Oh,
leverage
that's
that I
true.
didn't think about as well. So I didn't have to worry about my immigration status. It was like everything was already set up for
Yeah,
me in
you
a
had
way.
accommodation, you had maybe
Yeah, but
transportation, there was a
yeah,
car,
so
and all of that.
everything was, so I didn't, what others probably then my colleagues would, they're starting off. That has already been set up for me, which I didn't realize
Hmm.
now then that
Interesting.
was a leverage. That was something I could leverage on as well.
That because as someone who maybe my kids will be second generation
Mm,
immigrants, maybe that's something for me to watch out for, so they don't just relax that mommy and daddy's got it and then
mhm,
relax because
mhm, mhm,
we moved across seas for a reason
mhm, mhm, mhm.
and we don't want
And I
them to
think
relax.
yeah, but also I think the biggest thing is now it's better because now we're teaching our kids. We have this conversation a lot. We're teaching our kids about financial literacy. Then, I
Mm.
mean, growing up, even back home, it's not something you sit around the table and you're teaching your children about investment, savings, and stuff like that. We don't
No.
really do that. So, but
Mm.
I think, yeah, that's one of the things. Looking back now, I felt that I had so much opportunity that I could have made the best use of. But also I would say I didn't leverage the network I had as well. So when I
Okay.
said network I had was, I had you, other friends with single ladies. We could have come together to have joint ventures into investments and stuff
That's
like
true.
that. So now that's one thing I encourage younger people to say. You can pool. You give me 1K, you 10 people can come
Yeah, you can put
together.
resources together.
You can pull resources together as young ladies, which I
Yeah,
didn't I didn't leverage that at that time.
I'm definitely a big fan of pulling resources together because I believe that it's about also sharing risks.
Hmm.
A risk that you can't take on as a person. If you're
Hmm.
many, you might be able to share that risk and everybody feels comfortable doing that. But it also
Hmm.
requires actually finding the right kind of people because if you're the person that wants to do this kind of things and all the people surrounding you are not interested, then there is a problem. I think I did an episode on just this financial tribe, like I call it, like having a
Hmm.
financial tribe and just having people around you that you actually do talk about money together. Do
Hmm.
you think that your network then we're talking about money because you said I didn't leverage my network, so it was is it a case of like, oh, you had the right network but you didn't leverage it, or was the network also problematic in itself? What would you
I think
say?
some of them. I had a couple of friends who were talking about investments at that
Mm,
point, stocks and stuff like that. Bonds. I remember somebody was talking about bonds. I was kind of interested, but wasn't sure. There was so much
okay.
information. Of course, I did have the
Mm,
information, but I don't think at that point there was, oh, stocks might, things is a high risk investment and stuff like that. And at that point
mm,
also, I felt that because interestingly, among most of my peer group at that point, I was the one that started working quite early. Some of them were
Ellie.
just in uni. So, in a way, I don't think most of them would have been in that, how would I say?
Ed
They probably
space.
not in terms of headspace, probably earning capacity. That's what I would have said. I
That's
don't
true.
think
That's true.
they had that earning capacity. But also, I think one of the things then, start working, and by the time I think by the time I got to my almost 5 years of working, people are already saying that going to get married. Things like that is
Hmm.
like there's just a natural progression that people feel that
That's
you
that's
should,
right.
as a
I
young
was I was
lady.
I was sharing with someone. We were in the car with some friends, and they were talking about a friend that is traveling a lot, is single and is traveling. I was like, oh, I wish I did that when I was single because I think I got married like 6 or 7 months after my first job, and I'm like, I could have traveled, man. I could have
Mhm.
seen the world. I could have done other
Mhm.
things with. But it's like you said, there's always that. Oh, now you're done with your studies. Now you have a job, and the next thing to do is to get married. And sometimes we don't. It might be traveling, it might be investing, like you're talking about, but we just go on
Mhm.
to the next thing without really like soaking in the season
Mhm.
that we are in. And maybe that's
Mhm.
another lesson that you would probably say to your 20-year-old self. But
Mhm.
let me not jump ahead. We've talked about not saving, we've talked about not leveraging your network. Is there something else that you wish you knew at 20
I would say not
about
just at
money?
20, I'll say in my 20s. So in my
Or in
20s
your
of the whole
20s, yeah,
that
about
whole
money.
decade, because that's almost like 10, almost
That's 10
10,
years
15
actually.
years ago. Yeah. It's also that I could the biggest thing, and I think ladies should listen to this, is marriage is not an investment.
Hmm.
Marriage is not an investment. Read
At
my
least not a
lips
financial one.
properly.
It might be an investment in your emotional
It
self.
can be a liability. And it may be a good liability or a bad liability, because if you marry the wrong person, that's a bad liability. Because also understanding, I don't think people understand that when you get married, especially in this Western world, you are literally marrying the person's debts, their
That's
credits,
right.
everything. So that automatically affects you as well. So it's understanding that you might have a higher earning capacity as a couple, but also your expenses go up as well. And the more you're
That's
having
right.
children, that more in terms of your expenses as well. So it's not just about, oh, I'm getting married so that, oh, I would, it's more or less an investment. I don't think it's an investment from my own personal view,
Experience. Hmm.
except you're strategic about it. So you're being strategic is
Hmm.
both of you've got your financial goals, you know what you want to do in your first few years of marriage, how you want to set up your investment portfolio and all that. If that conversation has not happened, or you're not very strategic in that,
Hmm.
I think it can be a liability. So it's understanding that. And for me, that was the biggest lesson as well, knowing that marriage is not an investment.
Hmm. Yeah,
or
because
getting
I
married,
mean,
not the marriage itself, getting married.
like getting married,
Let's be clear about that.
because
It's not an
the
investment.
you do have a point, because right now we have people that are like, oh, especially in this side of the world where the housing is expensive and everything, and then people are like, oh, let's move in together, let's get married so that we can then share our bills and all of that. And they feel like it's a smart financial decision. But what you're saying is that it might make sense, but at the same time, it might also be something that leads to a big problem financially
Mm-hmm,
for the individual as well.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because many
Because
people do take those decisions thinking, oh, I'm going to reduce my expenses. We're
mhm,
going to be able to pay for for our accommodation together. We're going to be able to do
mhm,
this together. But um, it could also be a problem if you're not aligned financially.
mhm. And remember what I said, investment.
Mm,
Investment. Investment is about making profits. So,
that's
so
right.
if you go into so you might be living together, you might be quoting, in terms of you pull your resources together and you're able
Mm,
to quote expenses, but are you investing in that? Are you using that extra income in investment? So that's why I
to
say
do
it's not
something else that is bringing you
exactly.
returns.
Exactly. That's why I'm being mindful of that word. It's not just about, yeah, it might save in the long run when you two income household, but what are you doing with that extra income? Because if it's
That's
more or
true.
less coming together without being strategic about it, then it can become a liability more than an investment.
That's right. Good, great. Saving, network, marriage. What else do you look back on and think, I wish I knew better in my 20s
Um,
before I got older.
uh, this might be like a cliche, but no condition is permanent. Is
Mm,
also life is in
there are
seasons.
seasons, in life.
Life
That's
is
true.
in seasons. So even if you don't have that any capacity earlier on in life, you might build on your career and you have that any capacity. I wasn't where I
Later.
was, even though I was younger. I started early in my career as a nurse. I'm almost 20 years in the career. My any capacity has grown over the years, but it's also
That's
how do
true.
I leverage where I am at the moment. So it's
That's right.
understanding that nothing is permanent. I remember when I was younger, I was in so much bad debts, if I can use those
Mm,
words, even though now over the years I've grown and know more about good debts. So
mm,
it's that growth that comes with it as well. So I always tell people don't feel bad about the mistakes you've made. Don't feel bad about your poor
yeah,
financial decisions. No condition is permanent. So far you're open to learn and also work on
that's
yourself,
true.
have the right knowledge. It will help in the long run. So I will always say no condition is permanent. Don't ever feel that you can't get out of poor
Of where you are.
financial decisions. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or no, the
And I'm
outcome of
glad
your poor financial decisions. Yeah.
And I'm glad you say that, because like I always say that, or like even the adage that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and then the next best time is now. Even if
Mhm,
you had made wrong decisions earlier in life and all of that, then the best time to correct that is now, to start making the right decisions. And that's what I'm
mhm,
always telling people, even on this podcast or generally, that, or the reason why I do what I do here is like, oh, we can all start now. We can all start now. It's not too late. You can start investing now. You can start saving now. You can start thinking differently
mhm,
about your money.
mhm.
So we've talked about lessons learned and the things that. What do you think has helped you to maybe from how you were with money and how you are with money now? Do you think there's a big change? And then what
Mhm.
do you think has contributed mostly to that change in how you see money and how you are thinking about money?
You know my story. Probably we'll be able to share some other day. But I
No.
think the first thing for me was two things. I'll mention my children. I
Mm,
think the wake up call for me was when I had my two kids, is thinking about them in advance, that if anything should happen to me, how will my
mm,
children survive? I do not want my children to depend on anyone. So even like I said, no condition is permanent. I knew I'd made mistakes because I had my children in my 20s as well. So it wasn't as if, even
yeah,
though I
that's
was
true.
single at the beginning of my 20s, by the time I was coming to my late 20s, I've already got
You're
two
already
two kids at that
kids.
point. So that level of added responsibility. So for me is, okay, even if I don't get it right for myself, it's getting right for the kids. So
For the
I had to
children,
cut.
that's right.
Exactly. So I had to cut down my expenses. You know me, I was a spender. I got like the good life, want to look good. So I understand quickly, like, oh, looking good does not pay the bills, darling. So, but also increasing my earning capacity. I said like earlier on,
That's
my
true.
biggest investment. So I started using how can I use my skill, my competence to get for higher roles, but also invest in myself to make sure I am marketable. So that's another thing. I know
Yeah,
my
that's
biggest
true.
asset, it's myself. So I didn't use the mentality that, oh, I had kids, I can't do this. So okay, how can I make money? So I know that, okay, fine. I've got my career, I've got my skills, so it's increasing my earning capacity. Second thing is also
Mm.
financial, start early saving for
Literacy.
the kids as well. So financial
Okay.
literacy, understanding how saving early for my kids work in terms of understanding pensions, life insurance, having stocks accounts, but also having, like you, having friends that make me more accountable, open to
Mm.
learning as well. So learning
Mm.
more about how money works, learning about good debts, bad debts. I'm the kind of person that
Yeah,
when I hear the word credit card, my head goes, ooh, because I don't want to get into debt, but understanding how good debt works, leveraging network as well, understanding how contribution, where people can leverage, can come together to contribute for you for investment. But also, like I said
that's
earlier on, being multi-talented. So what are the other things, other talents I have that can leverage to bring in more
mm.
income? My 20s, I would say, was more of learning quickly. Then in my 30s was more of putting those things that I've learned into action.
Yeah, so sorry about that break in transmission. Welcome back. So apart from your kids, what else do you think was the biggest thing that changed your mindset from about money, from how it was when you're in your 20s and then later on in your late 20s, like you mentioned?
Hmm. Yeah, so I mean, I went through that journey into motherhood, understanding it's important that financial freedom for my kids, but also was my change of career as well. So I specialized in end of life care and
Mm.
understanding that as people come to the end of their lives, their regrets they
Mm.
have in terms of what they could have done. And I remember that sitting with someone who's dying, it's an opportunity to hear their stories, but
Mm.
also learn from their mistakes as well. So for me,
Mm.
I quickly understood that in my 20s, I'm in the building phase of my life. I'll either make the best use of it now or later on regret later on in life. So I had to, it was a wake up call for me. So I had to start building the foundation for the future I want. Yeah.
But most people will say, oh, when people are lying down and dying, they won't be thinking about money. What was it about people in their end of life that made you think about how you were spending your money or financially?
It's not about what you could have done with money. It's about how you could have lived your life. Those
Hmm.
are two different things. So seeing money not as an asset but as a tool.
Hmm.
And the question I'll be asking myself is, if I were to be coming to the phase of my life where I'm meeting my maker, have I
Hmm.
actually lived the life I wanted? Have I
Hmm.
actually fulfilled my purpose? So have I used my resources to
In
fulfill
the
the
right way,
purpose
the
in
best
the
way.
right way?
Hmm.
Exactly. And as we know, like I said, money is not an asset, it's a tool. It's a tool to be able to fulfill, either your own personal vision or God-given vision or anything you want to
Hmm.
do. So I don't have that money with me, if I'm unable to fulfill my destiny or my purpose, then what's the point?
Hmm.
So for me, it's
Hmm.
understanding that I need money to be able to fulfill my purpose.
Yeah, so you began to see money as a tool to fulfill purpose. That reminds me, kind of reminds me of like when Dave Ramsey in his seven baby steps, and the seventh one talks about like is when you start using money generously to be a blessing, that you start feeling like, yeah, this is the whole point. This is the most fun part of
Mhm,
of having money. And I think that's where
mhm,
most of us want to get to, where
mhm,
we're using money for a good cause and
mhm.
blessing people and being a blessing.
Yeah,
Interesting. So,
definitely. Yeah.
is there any other thing? Is there something else that you probably want to share on some of the things you learned about money, or that you
Hmm.
wish you knew about money, in your 20s?
It's also that my relationships are also a form of investments. I think at times people look at investment in terms of or properties or assets in terms of,
Mm,
jewelry and all that. But the relationship built over the years, they're also investments. They're also
mm.
you can leverage them because people talk about
That's right.
network and net worth. And some people will say your net worth is equivalent to the network you build around you. So that was something I also understood very early. Like you said, I'm going to be going into the 40s, and I
Yay!
realize, the relationship I built over the years, I could leverage them now. And I
Mm,
always say your relationship start with your credibility, your integrity, your
mm,
dignity. All those things
mm,
also can be a form of leverage. And when you start
mm.
looking through your life, there are
Yeah,
some people now, if they need money, they can raise £1 million within 5 minutes because they have people who have the capacity to
to
to, to
do
do that.
that. And we
Or
would do
it's
that
not
for
just about.
them. Mm,
Exactly. And it's not
that's
even
right.
about that as well. It's about, when we talk about net worth, it's not just in terms of money. It's also
Mm,
in terms of, fordering a course. If I want to do something right now, I know people that I can call on to support me and I don't need to spend money. Because most of the time we think about spending, but at times people can
mm,
support you without even spending
that's right.
any form of cash. So it's understanding that also as a 20-year-old over the years, probably that's something I've done well as well, is building those relationships. And that's one thing
Mm,
I encourage
that's
younger
right.
people. The building phase of your life is also building relationships around you. Don't ever think anybody is disposable because you never know in the future they can be
That's
massive
right.
help to you.
And some of that might involve maybe even um, spending or putting money down or taking from our resources to help other people in our network or these relationships. And we may never really, like my mom would always say that our father told her that if you bless people, it may not be the people you're blessing directly that will
Mm-hmm,
reward you, but it sometimes has
mm-hmm,
a way of coming back, so to say. Like,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I think we're going to get to that when we were about to get to that when we're talking about, okay, as Africans growing up, many times we invest in our family, and somehow in the culture as well, there is a way that the culture is built to also pay back when
mm-hmm,
it's time,
mm-hmm,
so to say. Like, you invest in people when they're doing their own
mm-hmm,
things, you're there. And so when you're doing your own things, they will be there, even though life is not supposed to be
mm-hmm.
transactional. But there's a little bit of that truth that is in that African culture of, like, you know, you help somebody out today and then tomorrow the community pays back, or in quote, or helps you back as well. Because relationships
Yeah.
do require investment, or it require us putting into it and giving into it, and sometimes that can be material giving into people that matter to us.
The African culture is a beautiful thing, and one thing I hope we can do better is building that community. And I think, if I have to be honest, I think the Asian community leverage that better than the African communities, whereby
Mm,
you can come together to raise funds. It's
that's
interesting. I say
right.
this a lot because I like I said, my
It
specialty is end
it
of
feels
life
like
care.
Africans come
People will,
together for big weddings and and children's
it's not
things,
even
but
weddings.
Asians come
People will
together
come
to build
together
businesses.
to people will come together to fund funerals, to fund people who are sick. But when it comes to funding people to buy their houses, to invest, we don't think about that. So it's also how we rewire our thinking about generational wealth.
Mm.
Because we only think about, okay, somebody's sick, somebody's dying, or somebody's dead. You see people coming far and near, people will donate. But if you're saying that same person wants to buy a house or wants to start a business, everybody start pulling back. So it's also thinking
Which is
about
so
that in that
funny that it's
mentality.
like that, really. Like, we don't mind, like, oh, there's a wedding, we're going to contribute. There's a funeral, we're going to contribute.
Mhm,
But if it's like there's a
mhm.
business, that's not the first thing we probably think
No.
about. Like, oh, we're going to contribute.
Mhm,
That's when everybody's like, ah, you're on your own.
mhm. No,
Figure it
and
out by
and I,
yourself.
it's yeah, and it's also how do we patronize our own people as well? How many
Mm,
of us actually will patronize a black-owned business or African-owned business? Because that's the way wealth is being created as well. You
that's
buy
true.
you buy from me, I buy from you. You support me, I support you. So it's
Mm,
thinking about it. We have a very good culture where we faith community, cultural communities. We build our systems in cultures, and that's how we've built generations over the years. But it's how we leverage that in generational wealth, in building businesses, in building systems
as well.
that
Yeah, we
will
need to start
prove
that
profits. Yeah,
reorientation about how we see
yeah.
things. So, as we're
Yeah.
getting into culture, just as we're rounding up, I wanted to just ask you, how do you think culture and these African traditions and things like that impacted your own journey, especially financial
Mm.
journey?
And there are the pros and the cons of it, and I think in hindsight, I always look at it from the negative side. But now I look back, coming to my 40s, is also the good side of it. So I'll start with
Mm,
culture. For me is the emphasis on marriage, the emphasis on faith, the
mm,
emphasis on education, the
mm,
emphasis on independence, the
mm,
emphasis on survival, the emphasis on identity, the
mm,
emphasis on resilience. All those things are things that I grew up with. And all those things are, how would I say, some things that contributed to my growth, personal growth.
mm,
However, I think it's the lack of understanding of her harnessing this strength in a way.
mm,
But also, like I said earlier on, a second generation immigrant, with probably a level of financial illiteracy. I think about it in terms of, I think when I started having my children, that's why I started thinking about legacy. I wasn't thinking about
mm.
legacy in my early 20s or late teens, because what was the point of legacy? I didn't see meaning to that. But also is
That's
also
right.
when you're the first generation immigrant, that level of responsibility is different from when you're a second generation immigrant.
That's true.
So it's also understanding that we're different, how would I say, seasons or different generations. However, there's some people who talk about black tax, but the reality where people talk about black tax is, I always say it comes from a level of choice. It comes
Mm,
from a level of choice. People say, but you don't have a choice. You do have a choice. You do
mm,
have a choice, but you have to do it in a respectful way. And the
mm.
reality
So,
is, you
so, so
don't
how do you
give
do it in
what
a
you don't
respect?
have.
Because when I asked you about
That's what I'm saying.
did the African culture affect your financial journey, and now we're getting into the black tax thing. How do
Mhm,
you
mhm.
break these cycles? How do you break the cycle of depending on your children as a retirement plan? How do you break the black tax respectfully? How do you think you can do
So
that respectfully?
yes. So our culture, like I said, is based on respect. And one of the
Mm,
things that I always say with respect is also the way you communicate respect. Most of the time, where I worry for people, and I've been naive in that area as well, is what when you overgive what you don't have. So you can't
mm,
give what you don't have. If you actually live within your budget, if you have actually know that I earn £2,000. If somebody from back home is asking me to give them
mm.
£5,000, I do not have that five
Have it.
thousand pounds because with the £2,000 I'm earning, I still have to pay my bills. I still have to do other
Mm,
things that probably at the end of the month I can barely be able to give £50. So now, if
mm.
somebody is asking me for £5,000 and I do not have that £5,000, why would I go and take a loan? One,
Yeah, to
to
sort
give
out that
that five
person's.
thousand pounds. And the question is, the £5,000 I'm given, is it an investment? Because most of
Mm,
the time, there's also the element of emotions as well. Are you giving because you don't want the backlash, or are you giving because
mm.
it's a dire need? If it's a matter of life and death, it's important. We know that. But
Yeah,
if it's on something that is just a want, not a need, then you need to set your priorities right. Because
right.
one thing
Yeah.
I always say is, the reality is, if you overgive, you are still going to pay the consequence of that, because that
Yeah,
means you've
that's
given
true.
£5,000 away. At the end of the month, every month, you're shortfall of minus 3,000 that you have to pay. So you start
Mm.
working hard, working
You do
more,
like
and the
10 shifts
reality
just to be able
is,
to keep up.
I, exactly. But I think that's changing a lot, because I remember back in the days, people think that when you come to the UK, you've got gold, you've got pounds
Yeah,
literally
just
littering the
the
floor.
streets
You're
of
just
gold.
picking the pounds and you're just spending it. But it's understanding, being honest with people to say that's not how it works. You
No,
get
exactly.
paid
And I think that's
for the
something that
work you
maybe
do.
like you're saying, it's getting better and better, that people are becoming more honest. There is no need to pretend. There is no need to, you know, there's an idea of what I remember growing up. We had like, you know, you have like your, you know, you have family abroad and you have an image in your head of what they should or not should not do for you. A lot of Africans
Mm-hmm.
have that. And then when you get here, you're like, hey, if you see 50 pounds, just be happy because it's not easy, right? And I think, like
Yeah.
you're saying, we need to become more transparent, more honest about how things are here, and then to
Mm-hmm.
be so confident in who we are enough to say, sorry, I won't be able to help you. Because, like I said, a lot of ego goes into, somebody asked me for £5,000. They think I should be able to afford it. So maybe I should go and find a way to help, you know, without really
Mm-hmm.
saying
Mm-hmm.
why. I should be honest. If I don't have it,
Mm-hmm.
I should be honest enough to tell you I don't, and say that respectfully so that
Mm-hmm.
my own finances are not affected negatively. So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
really very
And
important.
And it's also thinking in that way of, okay, even if I'm going to help someone, and of course, there's situations whereby people are in dire need. We know back home now, it's very difficult people to
Yeah,
live
things are
on 3 square
expensive.
meal. It's Bible even says it is blessed to give than to receive. Yes, there's some people you have to give because they need that.
Mm,
But the reality I always say to people is when you come to a place whereby you're giving out of emotions, out of guilt, then you have to think about it. You have
yeah,
to
that's
look at
true.
it in that way because one of the things you now start to challenge yourself is how can I build enough wealth so that when I'm given, I'm not stressed out. What
Pressing.
can I do? How can I leverage what I have now so that I can get to a phase whereby I can give without stress? Or
Yeah,
also empowering people around me to be more financially literate, that we can pull resources together and
together.
be able to do exactly. So it is looking at both ways. And because you said
Mm,
respectfully, it's also what I always say is not doing it out of annoyance or just, do you know how much I'm earning? Do you think I'm the central
Do
bank?
you
But
think
it's
I'm a
being
bankomat?
respectful.
I'm not an
Exactly.
ATM
Be
machine.
respectful to say, okay, you've asked for £5,000. I cannot afford £5,000. I can only give you £100. Look around, or if you can raise the funds somewhere else, that's okay. But this is how much I can give to you.
Mm,
And being honest about that. And one thing I've learned over the years, being able to say no. No does not
that's
mean
very important.
does not make you a bad person. It probably helps the other person to actually rethink their why as
That's
well.
right. That's true.
Because
That's really good. Thank you so much. So as we just need to be rounding up very soon,
yeah,
what would be your, you know, closing remark to the people, to your younger self, or to somebody who is 20 now or 18 now and is wondering, and is looking at their finances and saying, okay, what should I be doing better? What should I be doing? Where, you know, what's your advice to that younger generation?
I will end with three things. If you are in the ages of 18 to 24 or 18 to
Mm,
30, one of the first things I would say is start saving early,
that's right.
start investing early. And the third thing I would say is, came to my mind, it's gone off now. Save, invest, and
We're talking about insurance earlier before we continue, before we
oh,
started the
life
show, I think.
insurance. Do have a life insurance. It doesn't even matter if you don't have a mortgage. A life insurance can be life saving, but also
Mm,
some of the life insurance have cover for work as well. If you're unable to work for a certain number of months due to critical illnesses, they will cover you. There was
mm,
one, yeah, don't live on debts. Don't live on
mm,
debts, especially with credit cards. Be careful. If
mm.
you don't need it, don't use it. If you're gonna have credit card, it should be something you're using to build your credit, but don't use
Yeah,
it
for,
on
for
in
for
buying.
those living in countries where credit cards are used to build credit,
Yeah,
like I always say, be very sure
yeah,
you know the rules of what builds credit in your country before you think that the first thing that you need to do is to put things on a credit card. Because a lot of times that's the first thing people think about when it comes to building credit, but there's so many ways that you can build credit. But yeah, I totally get that.
hmm And the other thing is increase your earning capacity, increase multiple streams of
Invest in
incomes
yourself so that
when
you
you're
can earn
younger.
more.
it's easier. You can don't depend on a 9 to 5 job. Have at least, if possible, at least three streams of income as a young person.
Hmm.
Look, leverage your asset, leverage your talent, leverage your skills.
Yeah,
You
creativity.
increase your earning capacity as quick as possible, so that as you get into that working class or become a parent, then you have more
It
time. You
becomes
can live the
easier
life
for
you
you.
want. Save
Hmm.
into your future so that you have more time and the freedom you want. Don't think about financial freedom in your 50s. Start thinking about your financial freedom
In
right
your
from your 30s,
20s.
40s. Yeah,
That's right.
it's something to think about. Start early. That's the word. Just start
Wow,
early.
start early, start early. And that's a very good note to be wrapping up this episode. Start early, start now. Don't wait until it's too late. Start as soon as possible. And I just want to say thank you for coming on the show. I know we'll still have you on more episodes because you know you and I can talk. I will have other things to
Thanks
talk
for
about,
having
definitely.
me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And on that note, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. This is the Moneymatics Podcast. Catch you very soon. Bye.